So, Steve, recently you had the chance to play a bunch of upcoming Switch 2 demos, including some pretty major third-party ones from Capcom. And these are a big deal, because previously we've had some great Switch 2 ports like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Dynasty Warriors Origins, but these are coming day and date with PlayStation 5 and Series X. So it's pretty important that these run well and play well. So I'm really curious how... Let's start with Resident Evil 9. How does that hold up on Switch 2?
Resident Evil 9 might just be the most impressive thing I've seen on the Switch 2 to date. So you and I have actually both played this. Capcom told me that this was the same demo that was at Gamescom last year. And as everyone knows, you were there. So they brought it to America. And I think this might be the first time that it was available for US-based media to play. But I got to play it in both handheld and docked mode. And I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed with what Capcom has pulled off here. I know you've played it. Remind me, at Gamescom, was it in docked and handheld, or was it just one or the other?
So for Gamescom, it was only on PS5. This is the first Switch 2 showing.
Oh, okay. My apologies. So it's the same demo, like the same content, but this was the Switch 2 version. Now, I played it first off in docked mode because there were just more docked mode stations around the demo area. And it looks to me, I also have played the PS5 version. I played that at PAX West. It looks to me almost identical. Like when you see Ashley wake up, or the main character wake up, and she's just covered in sweat, all of those details are still there in the Switch 2 version. It's kind of nuts how much they've managed to keep this close to the other versions that are launching day and date with this one, and at a level of visual fidelity that's just nuts. But the most impressive thing about the demo in both handheld and docked, as far as I could tell, because they didn't let us record anything, other than by using our cell phones, it looks like it's running at 60 FPS. And obviously, saying that about docked mode is more important because that means that there's no possibility that VRR is smoothing the frame rate out. It just runs at like a seemingly locked 60 frames per second, at least in the demo portion.
Yeah, which is really impressive and important because every flagship Resident Evil since 7 has. So 7 and Village, they and 2 and 3 Remake, they've all ran at 60. But Village in particular only ran at 60 on like the current generation. So the PS4 and Xbox One were unlocked, so they couldn't actually reach 60. So the fact that Switch 2 is, doing a technically more demanding game and hitting way above what the previous generation could do is really cool. But technically, one thing I'm really curious about, because when you put these games side by side with PS5 and Series X, the obvious thing that stands out is the hair. The hair's been downgraded. Is that actually a big deal while playing, or is that something that just kind of sticks out when you're doing those side by sides?
It's going to be something that's going to. It's going to matter whether you're in third person or first person. I tried both. In third person, it definitely sticks out a bit. You'll see haloing around her hair as you walk through, particularly in dark areas, because she has very light hair. And if you're using the lighter or something and you're holding it up, you might notice a bit of a dithering effect around her hair. But when you're in cutscenes, it looks like there's no problem whatsoever. So if you're playing in first person, the only hair you'll see is in cutscenes, obviously. And that looks insanely impressive. Like again, I was looking for differences in these cutscenes and I just could not see them. Now, if I had both versions side by side, like you mentioned earlier, then I might be able to notice and pick out things more easily. But when I'm looking at it just running on a TV without another version, in my eye line, it just looks like this is every bit as good as the PS5. It's ridiculously impressive. I think one of the things that I'm getting used to is seeing the cutback in Switch 2 games being mostly frame rate related. Like, a game might run at 60 on PS5 and it'll run at 30 on Switch 2. This doesn't even have that. So we're getting something that is comparable from a technical perspective, visually speaking, but running at the exact same frame rate. So I don't know how Capcom's doing it. I tried to ask them a lot of questions like, are you using DLSS? Is this a global illumination system versus ray tracing, which almost certainly yes in this case. But they said they couldn't answer any of those questions about how they got this running so smoothly on Switch 2. But the thing that really interests me is when they revealed to me that this was the same demo that they had at Tokyo Game Show.
Right.
They said that this isn't representative of how well the current build that they have performs. They said that their current version, that's inching its way towards release, is even better than what they were showing me.
That sounds absolutely bonkers. Yeah, with past Resident Evil games, I found that the portable experience is actually really important, back on 3DS at least. I played a lot of Mercenaries 3D on 3DS just because it's so easy to pick up and play. And Resident Evils always have those extra modes like Mercenaries or Raid mode or whatever. So this is a legitimate version. It's not just like a cutback portable experience. Like this could be somebody's primary way of playing the game. So I am very curious about that portable mode a bit more, because like in the past on Switch 1, you'd get like these magical ports like Doom and Wolfenstein 2, and they were impressive, but they were also really blurry, especially in handheld mode. So let's talk a little bit more about the undocked experience. Like, what was the clarity like on that screen? Could you feel a cutback from docked, or did it feel just good?
It just felt good. It felt like I was taking what I was playing docked mode and just shrunk down.
Yeah.
I'm obviously, there's almost certainly going to be a resolution drop. Every game drops in resolution to account for the fact that you're no longer, tethered to a wall outlet or that you're not outputting to a TV. But when you're playing it in practice, it looks and feels just like you took what was on the TV, shrunk it down, and are now playing it. And I do want to be clear, if you go looking for cutbacks, you will find some.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of both docked and portable mode. Like if you're really like running into walls in first person mode to get the textures as close to the camera as possible, you'll see that they're likely to be lower resolution than they will be on, say, PlayStation 5 or PC. If you look at certain things like the way lights cast, if you're looking up at a chandelier and just examining the chandelier, which most people won't do in gameplay, then you'll notice, hey, that's not ray traced lighting coming off of that chandelier.
Yeah.
But realistically, if you're playing the game the way it's meant to be played and not analyzing every component of it, this just looks and feels like an entirely competent version of Resident Evil 9. It's kind of mind-blowing just how nice it looks. Like when I watched the intro, I actually saw it for the first time as I was just walking through the event space, and I was on my way because weirdly they put the Capcom games right next to where you got like coffee and food.
Mm.
And so I was walking on my way to get a drink to go back to another demo, and I just had to pause for a minute and watch someone playing this. And one of the Resident Evil reps came up to me and asked me what I thought of it. And I was like, I'm kind of in awe of what I'm seeing right now, because this is, I've played this on PlayStation, and this looks exactly like what I remember seeing at PAX, last year. So I would say that's the biggest praise I can give it. If you're not actively looking for differences, it's just going to blow you away. And to be clear, on handheld, it's still the same 60 FPS, still the same level of visual fidelity as in docked mode. It's just ridiculously impressive. I think, I know, John, you have kids and you often sneak in your time with games like RE9 in a corner in handheld mode. I don't think you're really going to miss anything if you do it that way.
No, you also get a little bit of leeway with VRR. So if there are any drops below 60, you're not really going to feel them in handheld mode, which is a really cool thing as well. I don't know if this has been communicated to you or at all, but are there other Switch 2 features being utilized, like mouse mode or anything like that?
I asked and they told me they couldn't tell me anything about content that wasn't in the demo.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. They also wouldn't let me take the Joy-Con off of the console I was playing with. I tried to do that. So I don't know if there's anything specific. One thing I do want to point out, though, is I did ask them repeatedly, like, what resolution the game's running out on Switch 2 and what frame rate it's targeting. And they said that they didn't want to commit to either because they couldn't guarantee that across the board it was going to run at 60 FPS. But in the demo, I didn't see a single drop. I tried everything I could to make it mess up, and it didn't. So I'm hopeful, but Capcom didn't want to just come out and say like 60 FPS all the time for this game.
Yeah, I'd have a lot of hope that Capcom would take full advantage because we know there's Amiibo coming to this game, and Street Fighter 6 squeezed into like motion control stuff. So they are probably going to take advantage of everything they can here. But it's good to know the technical side holds up very, very well.
I would think so. I would love to see mouse control for this game. I think it would be really, really good for, aiming as it is for many games. And I'd love to see gyro, but I couldn't confirm those, sadly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it all sounds excellent, and Resident Evil 9 just as a game is shaping up incredibly well. A fantastic mix of like what they were doing in Resident Evil 7 and a little bit of what they were doing in Resident Evil 2. Like, there's a flare of action in there, but especially in the Ashley moments, it's very horror and grounded, which is great. So I'm really excited for this. But let's talk a little bit about Pragmata, because we've barely seen this on Switch 2.
Yeah, the Pragmata situation is unfortunately a bit more complicated than the RE9 one. And it is worth noting that Pragmata comes out, a couple months after RE9. So they still have some time to cook with this one. But the Pragmata demo that I played on Switch 2 is the Sketchbook demo that came out near the end of last year for PC. Mm-hmm. So I suspect that we'll be hearing a release date for the console version of Sketchbook across the board pretty soon. But yeah, it was that same demo. And if you're unfamiliar with Pragmata, it's basically you're on a lunar base with a robot girl named Diana. It's a shooter with some puzzle elements to it. It's very, very compelling. I actually really love the gameplay of this one. It is more anticipated for me than RE9, just because it's something different and original. Yeah. But after having played the demo quite a few times on PC and going to it on Switch 2, unfortunately, there are some quite noticeable cutbacks on this one.
I've seen a few comparison shots from the Game Awards trailer where this was revealed on Switch 2. And there's things missing, like just general shadows. It's like less shaded than it should be. But the fact that they've squeezed this onto Switch 2 is still remarkable that they've managed to even get it running, even if these cutbacks are a lot more evident than something like Resident Evil 9.
Right. Yeah, I do find it impressive that the game is even on there. And frankly, when I'm playing it, I'm not thinking about the visual cutbacks. For me, the larger issue was frame rate. Uh-huh. So basically, in docked mode, Pragmata feels a bit rough. Like you can feel some frame drops occurring while you're playing it. It's one of those games that feels like it's probably hovering above 30 FPS, maybe in that. In fact, I would actually go as far to say that it's probably hovering in the VRR window, which is 40 to 60 FPS, but it's doing so at an inconsistent rate that makes it feel a bit choppy in docked mode. And the reason I say that is because it feels totally fine in handheld mode. Okay. This is one of those games where I feel like if you're picking it up on Switch 2, the best way to play it is just strictly in handheld.
Man, it's such a shame that VRR is just a handheld-only thing, because it does make a lot of those inconsistent games feel pretty excellent. And Capcom aren't generally ones to cap their games. Like I was saying earlier with the last-gen versions of Village, they just kept it unlocked, even though it didn't go close to 60. So it's probably going to be the same situation, but I wish they'll just cap it at 30 if it can't hit 60.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'd love to see them cap it at 30 in docked mode and then potentially unlock in handheld mode. Because like I said, handheld mode actually is the preferable way to play. It just feels a lot smoother and more responsive. And to be clear, I don't want to paint docked mode in Pragmata to say that it's like chugging and feeling bad. But if you're sprinting down a hallway, you'll notice the judder. In moment-to-moment combat or explorative gameplay, it's not going to feel terrible to play, but you will notice frame drops here and there. Like it gets a bit messy texture wise, it feels a bit muddy. Like it's kind of a stark contrast between this and RE9, where RE9 feels just amazing. Like they poured a lot of effort and resources into making it look as good as the PlayStation versions, or as good as it can be within reason. And then Pragmata feels like it has that typical Switch port issue that we saw a lot in the original Switch generation, where you can easily identify, even without seeing the original, that textures are lowered, things are of lower detail, and the frame rate is kind of suffering as well.
Yeah, and Resident Evil also gets the opportunity to hide in the shadows. Like it's a very dark game, so you can kind of get away with some of the cutbacks, whereas Pragmata is quite a brightly lit game, so those issues do stand out a bit more. But Resident Evil is mostly a known quantity. Like people have played modern Resident Evils like 7 and 8, which play quite similarly to this one. Pragmata, I think, is it's probably less known what the actual gameplay is like, even though the PC demo is out there. So speaking to those who play on console, just how good is Pragmata?
Pragmata is fantastic. I'm actually super excited for this. So it's a third-person shooter, and you play. I think the main character's name is Hugh. I really should know it, but you play a guy in like a space armor suit that honestly kind of reminds me of the main character from Vanquish a bit. And then you have this little robot girl. Her name is Diana. There's an amiibo of her, which actually
Yes.
I got some really good photographs of. And she rides on your shoulder. And while you're fighting enemies, you just have like a standard pistol, shotgun, like very, very normal munitions, but they're extremely ineffective against the robots that are attacking you on this moon base. So the wrinkle to the gameplay is that while you're aiming, on the right-hand side of the screen over your character's shoulder, a grid will appear, and you use the face buttons on your controller to navigate that grid and hit certain points. It's kind of like you're playing like a little maze game on the right while you're actively engaged in combat. And if you do that correctly, Diana will successfully hack the enemy that you're fighting and open all their armor, exposing their core so that you can shoot that. And that is like the key part of the gameplay. Like that's the core gameplay element that they've introduced for Pragmata. And it is incredibly fun. Like if you've never played it, it sounds really complex and hard to manage. But once you get into it and you get into the flow of that gameplay, it is incredibly satisfying to pull that off. Like it's not difficult really. You'll get to the point where you're able to just do it in your sleep almost, but they add layers to it because you can pick up additional hacking items that will then modify the grid and change things. And of course, the more powerful an enemy is, the more complex its grid is for you to solve. And it's just an action game that actually makes you think. Like I think for a lot of us that have grown up playing shooters, it's kind of second nature to just line up headshots, run away, reload, rinse and repeat. This adds an element of strategy to the third-person shooter genre that I wasn't expecting, that I really enjoy, and that I think a lot of people will. Capcom is really smart to put out a demo for this one because I think on paper the concept doesn't sound nearly as fun as it is in practice.
It's interesting. It allows Capcom to go back and do those like actiony, like Resident Evil 6 kind of games, but with a lot more personality. Because that game just had this middle ground of not being scary and also being a bit generic at times. Whereas Pragmata gets to take all of that action, add new layers, and just give a really interesting premise. And I'm really excited to finally play that game. Any idea what the amiibo does, or is that just a statue for now?
I have no idea. They wouldn't tell me. So at the event, and this is pretty typical of Nintendo, at the event, all amiibo are behind glass. Like they put huge glass squares over their amiibo. And it took me asking them quite nicely, but persistently, to let me photograph them to get them to take the glass off. And even then it was like, don't touch them. Yeah. Like I could get up close and photograph them, but they would not let me put a finger on them. So Nintendo was very protective of that. They also had the Mario Wonder amiibo at the event. And again, they would let me see, but they wouldn't let me, even blow on them. I had to just get close, and they wouldn't tell me for any game what the amiibo functionality was.
It's the only amiibo they have. It's the master copy. If that gets destroyed, they can't manufacture all the other ones.
I'd love to say that, but they had two. They had two of the Diana amiibo under glass.
But it is amazing, though, that we've come this far. We have had to fight to get Switch ports of major games, and now Switch 2's coming along, and they are coming day and date, especially these Capcom ones. And even though Pragmata sounds like it needs a bit more fine-tuning, it's still really impressive that it's there, and that Resident Evil 9 runs as well as it does. It's very promising for the future. And these are day and date games. People may decide to just buy them on Switch 2 and that be their primary console. And I know that's what I'm doing, at least with Resident Evil 9. So it's really cool to be in this state.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I think I can, I struggle to recommend Pragmata for someone who plays solely on their TV. Like if you play on your TV, maybe Pragmata is better on another platform. Mm-hmm. But regardless of how you play, RE9 is an easy recommend on Switch 2 on either side. Unless outside of the demo area it just falls apart, which I sincerely doubt.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be very impressive to play no matter how you choose to play. So RE9 is one I can recommend, regardless of your play habits. Pragmata is one I'd recommend if you know you're going to play this game in handheld mode only, then I think you'll have an amazing time with it. And there's still time to go. It's definitely possible that Capcom could continue to improve Pragmata's docked mode performance until it reaches the heights that RE9 has.
Yeah. And even though the game is a few months out, like you say, the demo was also probably created a while back. It's very rare they just, bring the build they currently have to that kind of station. But is there anything else you want to talk about from this event? I know we've got a bunch of videos already, but anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, I'm totally game to talk about anything that you're up for. I've played quite a few games at the event, so it's not all springing to mind, but I played Mario Wonder. I played
like tennis and Virtual Boy
tennis,
as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you in particular love tennis. So
I love Mario Tennis.
If you want to discuss any of those, I'm more than happy to.
Let's quickly talk about Mario Tennis fever, okay? Mario Tennis has this reputation that it doesn't deserve of being like this thing that's fallen under, the way line. Whereas Aces, I think, is just spectacular. And Fever seems like it is building upon it in lots of really cool ways. And you got to play multiplayer, which is the way that you play Mario Tennis. Like there's a single player mode, but it's not the longevity of the game. So I'm really interested in hearing about how the multiplayer held up.
It was wonderful, John. I think you're going to be really happy with this. I also really enjoyed Mario Tennis Aces. And in our preview, I mentioned that it kind of activates the same part of my brain that makes me love fighting games so much. And I think that is present and accounted for in Fever. There's still an element of wanting to take your opponent out, and it feels in a fun way unrelated to tennis.
Yeah.
You can still hit your opponent with the ball. You can reduce their HP. You can knock opponents out for a while if you hit them enough, which is all just kind of fun. Like it's a very aggressive tennis game.
Yeah. That's the thing, you can turn off these new mechanics if you want to, but I don't really know why you would. It's like tennis in itself already has a lot of variables. Like you've got to play mind games as to where you're hitting the ball, where you're going to defend, where you're going to be offensive. But then you just throw in all these different rackets, and suddenly every round is going to play differently. Aces gave everybody a pretty level playing field. This isn't the case this time, though, because you have like all these different rackets to choose from. So how does that feel? Do you think that's gonna not just be diverse, but is it going to be fair to just have someone playing with a totally different racket to you?
It's interesting because I would say that it does feel fair in that they're equally unfair.
Yeah.
So you have rackets like I experienced the mud racket, which leaves like a giant. It's really hard to overstate. Like it's a really big pool of mud. Basically, seals off a quadrant of the map or of the court for the opposing player. There's also like lightning, which will make lightning start randomly striking in a quadrant of the court. Then you have ones that like the bullet bill, which just fire at a crazy speed, so that it's really hard to counter. And once these area of effect ones are in play, you as the receiving player have to then balance, like, am I going to risk running into a place where I might get struck by lightning or I might slip on mud to return a shot? And it opens up a certain level of mind games that I found really compelling. I might shoot mud onto someone's court and then intentionally fire away from that, thinking that they'll expect me to fire my ball into the mud, to mess them up. And I found that it's just fun to try to anticipate what your opponent is thinking and to try to lead them into letting you score on them. The Fever mechanic is probably one of my favorite additions to Mario Tennis in quite a while. Like it just adds so much in terms of complexity in strategy to the game that I could see myself wanting to mess with these for a long time. Like I had a lot of fun playing this. One of my favorite rackets was the Thwomp racket, which honestly is kind of a double-edged sword because it makes Thwomps randomly drop on the opponent's court, but it can also screw up your own shots. Like if you shoot a shot and a Thwomp comes down in the path of your shot, it will actually hit it back at you. And then you have to respond to your own messed up shot.
That is cool. Even activating them seems like a risk because if someone returns it before the ball bounces, it comes back at you without the effect having landed. So there's a chance that it could backfire on you. So you have to like activate it at just the right moment. Otherwise, it's not actually going to benefit you. But you've also got to take into account like when are they going to activate their one. So there's all these different mind games going on and strategy. So I think people are like drastically underestimating how deep this game is going to be.
Yeah, we actually had a volley during the preview in which 3 of the 4 of us, because we were playing doubles, used our fever shots in just the one turn. So like one person did the lightning one, Blessing Adeoye Jr., who I was playing with, did the thwomp racket. It got returned, and then I did the bullet bill, and it was just the court for the next couple of volleys was pure chaos. Like, because there was lightning and mud and thwomps, and it just was wild. Like it's a lot of fun, and I think that it adds something to the game to just have these effects, because then you have to start thinking about your own movement much more than you've ever had to in a Mario Tennis game before.
There's a lot more going on in terms of chaos than Aces, but the visuals also look like a major overhaul. There's a grass texture now, which Aces didn't really have, and the crowds are like always visible. There's like people, there's like full 3D models, and the crowds all animating. In the moment, did you pick up on that stuff, or was it just very much gameplay focused?
I did not pick up on those in the moment. To be fair, when you play these preview events, it's very hard to get like a good feeling for that. So one thing that you don't get to see, or one thing that you don't get to hear, is just how loud the environment you're in is when you're playing these. It's because there's, it's not like it's just my station of 4 TVs. There's 4 more and 4 more, and people are having conversations, and you're also sat like a really far distance away from the TV, like much more than most people normally would. And I get it. It's an event space. So you have to work with what you have, but it's like a 32-inch TV and you're like 6 feet away from it. So you don't really get to pick out the fine details. But when I was watching my footage back, that again, Nintendo has this insistence on, and this has been something not just in the Switch 2 era, but forever, like ever since we've been covering Switch, that you have to have a person in the shot when you record, which is difficult. But when I was watching it back and I zoomed in past my own body, I did notice that the game looks really nice. Like visually, this is a great game. And again, shouldn't be a surprise, runs at a fully locked 60 FPS. Like it's just it's effortlessly impressive, which is something Nintendo's really good at. Like you just think, oh, that's what a Mario Tennis game should look like. And then you look back at older ones and you're like, oh, but it is a pretty good improvement over even, Aces.
Yeah. And there's so few tennis games that even exist anymore, especially arcadey ones. So it feels a really cool niche. Not to just reiterate over the last video. Let's not touch everything, because you guys can go back and watch the other video. But let's talk a little bit about Virtual Boy as well, because I'm really curious what you think of the games themselves, and also the experience of the quality of putting yourself in a Virtual Boy with a Switch just pushed into it. So what was it like?
So Virtual Boy is really interesting, and surprisingly, I got to talk to a few other people, like Logan from IGN, Blessing from Kind of Funny, because we were paired up for a lot of things. And this was, and according to Nintendo as well, one of the most popular things at the event. Like people really wanted to see the Virtual Boy. And I think they were even surprised by that, because they only had, I want to say 3 or 4 of them on hand. So
they underestimated. Like, this thing's sold out in America right now. You can't buy one.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't count on people being this interested in the Virtual Boy. And I think that's very telling. Because obviously the Virtual Boy was a massive flop for Nintendo. And so I think a lot of us thought it was a weird decision. But when you go in, they had just 3 or 4 of the plastic Virtual Boy. And as we learned, the plastic Virtual Boy is a little bit more fancy than the cardboard one. Like it has the removable red filter. But beyond that, it is, to be very clear, just a shell for the Switch 1 and Switch 2. You just open it up and drop a switch. I asked Nintendo to either let me do that or to show me, and they wouldn't, which I thought was a little like, I was like, yeah, you could do it. I mean, come on, but maybe they had them locked down or something. I don't know, but it's worth noting. Plastic Virtual Boy has all the indentations and buttons and stuff. None of those work. There's no moving parts to to either of these two. But when you stick your head in the headset, it is almost instantly incredibly impressive. And I can't imagine that the original Virtual Boy looked half this good. I have to imagine that this is vastly improved, because the 3D effect was really, really cool. So when you go into the NSO menu, it's built like every other NSO menu you've ever seen. You've got like a little sidebar and you've got a bunch of box art, but it's 3D. So like the NSO sidebar is hovering over the box art, and there's like this subtle sense of depth to it when you go in. And one thing that I struggled with was when I put my head in the headset, it was really out of focus for me. And I asked the Nintendo rep if there was a way in the Virtual Boy to change the interpupillary distance, which for those of you that are unfamiliar or have never played VR, that's like the distance between your pupils. And usually in most headsets, there's like a knob or a dial where you can move the lenses physically ever so slightly to fix that. But they've done it in software. And so what you basically do is you go into the settings menu in the Virtual Boy NSO app, and you're able to basically increment up a value, and it will move the circles on the Switch's screen closer together to replicate that effect. And for my experience, it worked just as well as having an actual hardware dial. I was able to get dialed in, and then the 3D effect was perfect. And I played a handful of games. I played Wario Land, I played Tolero Boxer, I played Red Alarm a little bit, but I didn't spend a ton of time in the headset because it was near the end of my day. And, Nintendo doesn't give you like 5 more minutes. They're like, okay, your demo's over. We need more people in here. You got to go.
Yeah.
So I played as much as I could, and I was very, very impressed with just how well the 3D effect worked.
Yeah.
Like Tolero Boxer, I think, was the one that best gives a sensation like really quickly, because it's a very simple game. You just have hands that zoom in and out of the screen. And one thing that I noted is that even when things were coming out of the screen at me in the Virtual Boy, it didn't feel nearly as fatiguing to my eyes as the same effect on 3DS. Like when I've played 3DS games where things, try to pop out at you, I would feel noticeable eye strain after a little while with those, where I didn't feel that with this.
I actually feel, I said this before in the past, I feel that Virtual Boy does a lot of stereoscopic 3D better than 3DS. Like 3DS, it thrived in those games that did sprite layers. So like Mutant Mudds and Shovel Knight and Cave Story 3D, games like that, because they're very distinguished. Like a different sprite layer clearly just stands out next to another one. The 3D games, they look great, but I think those sprite games just really were beautiful. And Virtual Boy is like nothing but that. So you get these very distinguished layers that stand out incredibly well. But more than that, these games, they never had a 2D mode on the original hardware. So they were always designed around looking 3D. So you get games like Wario Land, where the 3D is integral to the gameplay. Like seeing that layer in the background that you can jump into, it's meant to look like really obviously far away, and it does. Even on real hardware, it looks really good. And there's boss fights in Wario Land where the bosses just hop back and forth. Like one hops over a river to get to the background where it attacks you from there, and it looks spectacular. People, they hate on the Virtual Boy all the time, but the software and the functionality was never the problem. Like those were always really good. So I can't wait until people get to experience this stuff and actually see that there's a lot of value on this system.
Yeah, it was so impressive to me that when I got home, I sought out and bought a Virtual Boy because
just crazy, but cool.
Yeah, I desperately want to know, is this as good as what I saw in NSO? Mm-hmm. So I'll know soon enough. But I was deeply impressed, and it kind of, while I understand why it didn't work out in the 90s, I also now similarly understand why Nintendo was so keen to bring this back, because it's another one of those kind of begrudging things where I feel like Nintendo knew that they had something on their hands that was compelling, but the market just wasn't ready for it. And I think they're kind of pulling the same thing they did with the Wii U, where they ported every Wii U game to the Switch just to prove to us that the games were not the issue. And now they're doing the same with the Virtual Boy. Like, we had great games for this. You guys just were too stupid to buy it. So we're going to now show you by re-releasing this whole library on the Switch. It was very, very impressive to me. I think that if the real Virtual Boy is anything like what I experienced, then I kind of am kicking myself for going all this time without ever having tried it.
Yeah, well, at least it's not too hard to catch up with the library. But they didn't show off the new games, I imagine, because they're kind of drip feeding the Virtual Boy lineup a bit. So no Zero Races
we
and
had
D-Hopper.
Just the launch lineup.
Yeah, okay. Which is understandable. I mean, these are going to be brand new games to most people regardless. But Zero Races and D-Hopper are incredibly exciting. A brand new F-Zero game, a brand new Intelligent Systems game, and we barely even saw these games in the past. I think D-Hopper's only had some magazine scans, and F-Zero, I think, was a little bit of gameplay from like a Space World or something. But these are largely undocumented, so the fact that we're going to be playing them sometime this year is crazy. So I'm enthralled by what they're doing here. Really cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think that my favorite part of NSO is when we get these games that no one's ever heard of, or that no one's ever gotten the opportunity to play that haven't come out. Because we all kind of collectively, as a group of fans, have imagined that Nintendo has this like Disney-like vault where they keep all these things that we had seen individual screenshots of that we never got, and they're kind of proving that by releasing things like Star Fox 2 and now these and now these games on NSO for Virtual Boy. Not to mention, outside of the games that never released, we're getting games that if you even had a Virtual Boy, a lot of these would be insanely expensive to get your hands on today.
100%. Like, they're doing Jack Brothers, not at launch, but a bit down the line. That's really expensive. It's the first ever Shin Megami Tensei game to release in the West, so it's historically important, and it's just a fantastic game. There's a hurdle to playing Virtual Boy. You've got to buy some hardware, whether it's the cardboard or the system itself. But once you're in there, I think you're actually going to really appreciate what they're doing. And another thing you can do is, because it's basically just Labo VR, you should be able to play basically any Switch 1 VR game using either a Virtual Boy or the cardboard.
Well, I can tell you that Nintendo did officially confirm that works. Awesome. That was one of the first questions I asked them. I said, "Can you just play Labo if you don't want to play Virtual Boy?" And they're like, "Yeah, it works." So they confirmed that you can play your Labo VR games in either of the two Virtual Boy headsets.
Yeah, which is kind of a big deal, because adding more resolution is always good for VR, and the Switch 1 screen was 720p. So you've got games like Breath of the Wild, which were on a 720p screen, but rendered lower when using Labo VR. But the Switch 2 edition is 1080p, and I imagine it's probably going to render a full 1080p. So that might make Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition actually quite nice in VR, which was never the case for the Switch 1 version.
Yeah, I don't typically feel ill in VR, but I did in Breath of the Wild VR. So I'd be very curious to try it.
But yeah. Well, that is probably about all for now, Steve. I really appreciate your impressions. It's very exciting that this system, I think, in this year is really going to stretch its legs and show us like just what it's capable of. And it's so cool seeing Capcom just really push it out with these big games day and day. And Nintendo, they're doing some just weird, wacky stuff, which we always like to see. Like they've got the best-selling console, the fastest-selling console ever right now, and they're still doing weird little things like Virtual Boy, which I love to see.
Yeah, this is a Nintendo era that I'm very pleased with so far. Like you said, getting day-and-date releases from third parties is huge, and I'm going to support these. I'm going to pick up both Resident Evil 9 and Pragmata whenever they come out. Well, Resident Evil 9 and Pragmata, we know when they come out. I'm going to pick those up when they do. And, I'm very excited to play quirky, weird little Virtual Boy games on my super powered tablet. So it's a cool time to be a Nintendo fan. And I think that they've got some really interesting stuff in the pipeline. We didn't touch on it too much, but I'm also really excited for Bella Bell Park when that drops. Just all around. Like, the state of the Switch 2 is something I'm really happy with right now. I think that we've got a lot of releases coming out, regardless of what type of games you like to play.
Yeah. We've got much more structured thoughts than this in a separate video, so you can check out those and also learn a bit more about Mario Wonder's Switch 2 DLC. Steve's done a fantastic job with all that, so go and check that out as well. But until then, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and we will catch you next time. Bye-bye.